Hello everybody, Meta here, with the final ROM hack for my main look of Generation 2 hacks. Don't worry though, just like with Generation 1 ROM hacks, I will occasionally come back to review more and more as time goes on, especially since Gen 2 is my favorite, and there are plenty of hacks to look over, as well as the hacks that are still being worked on. Anyways, as a final send off for now, I decided to return to the shores of Johto for a hack that almost makes me feel like I missed a lot since I was gone. I mean, it looks like the Johto I remember, but there's still a lot of new areas, people, and Pokemon that I do not recall being here. It's almost as if the region has been polished into a new brilliant shine. Pokemon Polished Crystal by Rengi42 is a hack of Pokemon Crystal that completely overhauls the original game with tons of new content and features, creating a whole new experience for the familiar journey through both Johto and Kanto. With the addition of some new extra areas to explore, several features from future Pokemon games, and plenty of quality of life improvements, Polished Crystal truly lives by its name and how it pushed the original game to its very limits, until it reached its perfect gleam. Now, before I dive into all the new content this hack has to offer, I want to go over the vast amount of customization Polish offers, and how much it makes the experience even better. One thing I really love about this hack is the amount of options it provides, allowing you to adjust and change them to create the perfect experience for your liking. Of course, you have your basic options that every Pokemon game features on the starting menu, but there are a couple of new options here where you can adjust the UI a bit, and change both the display of the clock and the Pokédex. Once you start the hack though, you're given a whole other menu where you can decide how exactly you would like to experience your adventure. A lot of these settings in this menu are linked to mechanics that modern Pokemon games feature, such as natures, abilities, EV gain, and the special physical split, allowing you to either keep the traditional Gen 2 style or catch up with the times for the journey ahead. The hack also gives the options to have affection-based events that happen during battle, like your Pokemon surviving killing blows or landing critical hits more often if their affection levels are high enough. Personally, I'm not a big fan of this mechanic, but hey, that's what these options exist for. There is also another page of more miscellaneous settings to choose from, with some of these being pretty interesting features that the hack adds in. There's an option to create a more even playing field for every battle through giving both you and your opponents perfect stats, an option I found quite interesting, but didn't use it for my playthrough this time. Then there's the option to make all traded Pokemon immediately obey you regardless of level or badge count, which to me kinda defeats the purpose of them, but I can see why people might enjoy this feature, considering watching said Pokemon completely disobey you in battle is probably frustrating. Plus it helps with dex completion. The next option is one I actually think is pretty cool. The ability to have your Pokemon evolve during battle once it reaches the required level. Of course this option obviously oozes anime vibes, since most of the time in the Pokemon anime, a Pokemon would evolve mid-battle and immediately turn the tide on its opponent. Then again, if you're already beating your opponent and your Pokemon evolves, it kinda just feels like overkill at that point. Lastly, there is the option to have all the Pokemon in the hack to be seen in several different color variations, inspired by the different color palettes a Pokemon can have in Pokemon Stadium through nicknames. And for those who are curious, no, this feature isn't linked through the nicknames of your Pokemon, but something that naturally occurs for all 251 Pokemon in the game. What I love about this option is that it makes each individual Pokemon in the game feel a bit more unique, rather than just being the same one you saw like 3 encounters ago, giving more life and variety to the Pokemon world itself. However, I was a little worried that this feature would make it a lot harder to distinguish shiny Pokemon from the several different variations. But thankfully, Rengi thought of this by putting a star next to the name of the Pokemon if it is shiny. Plus the animation for encountering one still exists. As I said before, I really love that this hack not only adds loads of features into it, but also that you can freely choose if you want them present or not. And even better, each of these features can be individually switched on or off, giving me the choice to, have both natures and abilities on, but remove the physical special split. I mean, the possibilities here are kind of endless. Before I get into all the original and new areas that Polished Crystal adds, despite my excitement for them, I wanted to go over all the improvements and changes that the hack adds to the crystal that we're already familiar with. First off, I want to start with the most obvious issue that Crystal has, the level curve. Thankfully, just like Crystal Legacy, Polished Crystal fixes the issue of the awkward level scaling. However, unlike Legacy, Polished Crystal has you fight Chuck, Jasmine, and Price through the intended order with the use of roadblocks, which at the end of the day isn't a bad thing since they're all properly scaled, including Price. Also, due to all the new areas in the game, as well as new trainers, the level curve has been bumped up a bit, so all the gym leaders in Johto have newer and stronger teams to face. And this also goes for the gym leaders in Kanto, as they have been properly scaled to post Elite Four status. This level scaling required me to grind a bit throughout my playthrough, but I do believe if you're decent enough at Pokemon, you shouldn't need to grind that much. Just expect a decent challenge during your adventure. Next up, Polished Crystal adds in several features from future games in the Pokemon series to the original Crystal, mostly things from the Generation 2 remakes Heartgold and Soulsilver, which to me is completely fine since those games are amazing. For example, Lyra, who is the female protagonist in the remakes, appears in the hack to act as a secondary rival, choosing the star that is weak to the one that you chose. And while this did worry me a bit, considering we had two rivals in the main series who also made this decision, and we saw how that turned out, Lyra actually proves to be a competent opponent, and can easily beat you if you choose to underestimate her. She also does receive a pretty cool arc in the post-game, where she decides to take on the League Challenge in Johto while you take on the gyms in Kanto, to become just as strong as you are. I genuinely love the way the hack handles Lyra's character here. She's still a happy go-getter eager to meet the many Pokemon in the world, but now she actually proves to be an interesting rival on her own throughout your adventure. To me, she kinda acts as a foil to Silver. Being someone already in love with their Pokemon, she learns to push them to their very limits through their bond. While on the other hand, Silver only uses his Pokemon as tools and then eventually learns to love and trust his Pokemon by the end of his arc, highlighting that you can only get stronger if you truly trust your Pokemon. She also does feature her own custom overworld and battle sprite that both look very good. Speaking of new characters, the hack also adds in some of the other characters from the remake, like all the Rocket admins, which look really good here, and have all been translated well into this new style, granting the criminal organization more personality. Plus, I've always really liked the admins, and thought they were a great addition since all the other teams had named admins at this point. Beyond the remake specific characters, Polished Crystal adds in a bunch of characters and trainer classes from other games, and gives them all new sprites for both the overworld and in battle. My favorite part about the new trainer classes is that it adds more variety to the people and Pokemon you face during your journey, and fills in for some of the types that don't really get much attention outside of their gyms, like Hex Maniacs, making ghost types more common to fight outside of Morty's gym during your adventure, or Dragon Tamers doing the same for dragon types. As for the new characters, you can find a bunch of cameos of familiar faces throughout your journey. Characters from other Pokemon games and the anime make an appearance and will either challenge you to a battle or give you something to help you out on your journey. As I said before in my Extreme Yellow review, I'm a huge fan when other regions are either mentioned or straight up have some form of representation in games or hacks, because it really makes the world feel a lot more connected. Plus the Easter eggs and references are always nice. Wait a second, you're not even from Pokemon. Along with all the new characters, Polished Crystal adds in several new Pokemon in. However, these new additions are only extensions to the current existing Pokemon within Crystal. By that I mean, evolutions and regional variants of the existing Pokemon within Generations 251 are the only new additions to this hack. I know some people may be a little bummed out at this limitation, but to me I don't really see it that way. I believe that only adding these Pokemon is a pretty great decision overall, and not just to the player, but also to Rangi42, since I can only imagine coding and creating all the sprites for these Pokemon take a great amount of time. Anyways, the reason I believe this is a great choice is because it helps prevent the selection of Pokemon from becoming way too overwhelming, and it would completely dilute all of the encounter pools in the game. Plus, it makes it possible to actually fill out the Pokédex in a reasonable amount of time. I can only imagine having to catch over 1,000 Pokemon to fill the Pokédex. Thinking about that scares me. Ugh. Now, despite all that, I do believe there still is a decent variety to choose from within this hack. And sure, there may be some Pokemon I would like to see make an appearance, but I'm more than happy with what the hack provides here. Lastly, I want to go over the updates and changes to the UI of all the menus in the game, as well as some quality of life additions that the hack adds. For the item menus, the hack adds in a new sprite for every item in the game, so it can't be displayed when hovering over it inside your bag or when shopping. The Pokédex also receives a facelift as well, to look very similar to the remakes, and I gotta say, I'm loving how much easier it is to navigate. The region maps have also been updated to match the style as well, featuring sprites to represent all the several landmarks within both regions, instead of them just being red dots that they are in the original. And lastly, the PC system also receives this same treatment, although I was a bit confused by it at first, must be because I'm used to the old system, but it was fairly easy to catch on and get used to it. Obviously I enjoy all these changes, because they're inspired by the remake and are a lot easier to navigate than the old menus. I don't see a lot of hacks doing this sort of thing, except when Crystal Clear completely overhauled the Pokédex, which was very much appreciated. I get that not many people are truly looking at the menus in the overall UI when playing a hack, but I think more hack creators should give changing them up a try, just to make them look more unique. As for some quality of life additions, Polished Crystal does a really great job at making a lot of tedious mechanics in the game a lot more bearable for the long run, which is great since this hack is just massive. For starters, the hack does equip the player with the all-glorious run button, which even has an option to have it on at all times. And speaking of moving at faster speeds, surfing is a lot quicker like in some of the other hacks I reviewed. However, my favorite addition is actually one I mentioned in my Pokemon Coral review, and given that Coral is built off the engine this hack is on, the mechanic probably started here. The mechanic I'm talking about is field moves being able to be used by Pokemon without them having to actually learn the move itself. Instead, if they can learn the move, then it can be freely used outside of battle anytime they want. The badge is still needed though, so you can't just go surfing the seas at the beginning of the game. Sorry. Finally, the last major quality of life addition to the game is that you can register 4 items instead of just 1, which is very nice, since I always hated having to constantly go into my bag to use the fishing rod, because the bike is my only registered item. And also I'm too stubborn to constantly change them, so yeah. To be honest, I'm not really sure to start with all this. I mean, there's just so much to talk about, considering the amount of brand new and original content this hack adds. So I guess we'll start with the new sprite work that was created for this hack, and how amazing it looks. All the new Pokemon, the new characters, and even the new areas have all been carefully crafted to not only look unique, but also perfectly fit the style of Gen 2. The hack also updates the look for some of the existing characters in the game so that they match their modern designs, as well as update the look to some of the Pokemon in the game. And not to knock the original sprite work, but some of these new sprites look a lot better. Speaking of Pokemon, some of the Pokemon in the game were given a new typing to work with. For example, Ninetales is now a Fire Ghost type, which helps it stand out a lot more from all the other pure Fire types in the game. It also gives it a wider variety of moves to work with as a special attacker. Another example is Ampharos, who actually gains its Mega Evolution typing of Electric Dragon, which I find very interesting. On one hand, this new typing gives it more resistances and a way to defeat dragon types a lot more easier with stab. However, it does gain a weakness to those dragon types and ice types as well, making it a bit harder to confidently take out any of the several water types in the game that can easily learn Ice Beam. Still, I'm a big fan of this change, because a lot of Pokemon in the series get passed up due to there being another Pokemon that does what it does better. So granting these new typing to certain Pokemon really help those who are overshadowed be brought into a new light. It also helps add a bit of extra challenge to the game, where you might get caught off guard at a Pokemon's new typing, requiring you to relearn the best way to defeat them. As for all the new areas the hack adds, Polished Crystal adds not only extensions to the pre-existing regions in the game, but also a whole new area in the postgame to explore at your leisure. For the extensions, a good amount of them are new dungeons to explore that mostly act as homes for the newly added Pokemon in the game, but also have plenty of items and new trainers to challenge. Other extensions give the player more ways to traverse through the region, making it feel a lot more connected than it already is. Also, a couple of these new areas feature events or are homes to some of the legendary Pokemons within the game, so keep a good lookout. I also really like that all these new areas were completely optional. But if you're like me, then as soon as you know they exist, you're finding a way to get to them as soon as you can. I absolutely adored a lot of these extensions, especially the ones that featured themes the original game didn't have. My personal favorite of these would have to be the swamp that is located in the southmost part of Johto, where some of my favorite regional variants can be found. I also just really like the aesthetic of swamp areas, but not as much as snowy areas. I also really like the inside of Cinnabar Volcano and how it looks with all the bubbling magma surrounding you. It really reminds me of the volcanic area in Pokemon Coral, which I can assume was probably inspired by this dungeon. Now, as I mentioned before, this hack features a completely new and original area to explore in the postgame. This new area, just called Islands on the map, not only features plenty of new places to explore and things to discover, but also a new small storyline to follow. Now, I won't go into too much detail about this new area in order not to spoil anything, but I will say that once you arrive on the shores of Kanto, you'll meet Lawrence III, who is on the hunt for the legendary birds. Of course you can do this little quest whenever you want, but it is a neat little extra bit of content to indulge in. As for the islands themselves, they feature a lot of new dungeons and new areas to explore, and I really enjoyed everything about it. I also do like that the scaling for the trainers in Pokemon here are post Elite Four, so that you can immediately traverse through them without having to worry about getting stomped by super high leveled Pokemon. But it does feel kinda like overkill when you do decide to visit them after defeating a good portion of the Kanto gyms. As for the last bit of new content the hack adds, I decided to go over some of the smaller additions to the game itself. First off, the hack adds a new music for some of the new areas in the game and for certain battles to give them more of a unique feel than the base game. The hack also adds in random weather effects that can occur anywhere to affect the battles within said region. Now I'm not sure the odds of this happening since it's only happened to me once outside of the areas that it's supposed to happen. And finally, the hack also adds in wonder trading, the only way to send off a Pokemon you don't really care about in hopes of getting something you do want. Wonder trading is a fun little service that can really be helpful for building a team or filling up the Pokédex. Either way, it's all completely optional. Pokemon Polished Crystal is one of those hacks that really stick with you as such an amazing experience. And throughout my playthrough, I was just amazed over and over again with the amount of content jam-packed into one adventure. I also really love the amount of freedom that the hack gives you, not only in the way that you can play through it, but also how you experience everything that the game has to offer, with the new content not being mandatory, but then again, I don't know why you would skip it. I mean, it's hard to deny the amount of effort and care that Rangi42 put into this massive hack, pushing this beloved game to its very limits, and I truly believe that this hack is one of the best Gen 2 hacks out there. I would most definitely recommend this to anyone who hasn't played this hack, just to give it a try. Plus it looks like this hack may get more and more updates in the future, so it can only get better. And with that, my journey through Generation 2 hacks are done. Of course I am a bit sad at this, but I will always come back every now and then, especially since there are still many more hacks to go over. For now though, I'll see you in the world of Generation 3. Meta, out.